Welcome to Paranormal Chat with Jenn. Tonight, I have a special guest, Chris Edge. He is a personal friend, a dogman researcher, member of the NADP, and YouTube host of Cryptonormal X and Dogman X. Welcome, Chris. My computer is not working.
Hello, Jen. How are you doing tonight?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Doing fantastic. Thank you.
Thanks for coming on.
Absolutely. I was just going to say thank you for even thinking of putting me on. I was surprised when you said, hey, yes. Like, yeah. My first interview, like 7 months. So hope I have enough steam.
I have faith in you.
Thank you. I have faith in you, too.
Thank you.
But seriously, though, thank you for having me on. I'm glad to be here. I'm excited to do the show tonight and go forward.
Well, thanks for coming on again. I'm looking forward to it. I know you've done a lot of research. You've got all kinds of stories. You're an NADP member. So I'm looking forward to this interview.
Absolutely. Same here. It's going to be very exciting. We got a lot to talk about, too. A lot of questions, too. I like them, too. Can't wait to get my views on them.
Yeah, I thought, well, what all can I ask him? And then it just started rolling out. So shall we get started?
Absolutely. If you got the 6-pack of beer set up to go, then absolutely. I'm wired. I'm ready to go.
I've got the large McDonald's cup with Coke. Is that close enough?
I can't drink Coke. My diet.
All right. So why don't you just tell us about yourself and tell us whatever you like.
Well, for everyone tuning in, hello, everybody. Familiar voice. It's been a while since I've been on a microphone. Well, my name is Chris Edge. I am a researcher in Dogman and various cryptids and paranormal. I've been doing this for the past 4 years, and now here I sit. I reside up in the northern east. You can figure out where I'm at. If you have the chance to figure out where my residence is, good luck. And on top of that, I'm just fun-loving guy. I can have you chat for an hour and get you laughing for an hour. And, of course, like I mentioned before we started the show, you have the 6-pack, you can drink and talk all. But other than that, that's basically about me. That's all I can really say much besides my entertaining lifestyle I can present to the table.
Well, as he said, he's from the Northeast. I know where he's from, but good luck to everyone else trying to figure this out. I tried to get him to let me say he was the southwest side of Canada, but I thought that was kind of funny.
With my maple.
All right, so why don't you tell us about Cryptonormal X and Dogman X? I've watched both the shows, and I actually, when you went live a few times, I actually asked questions to Jody and made comments when he was on there a couple times. So feel free to tell us about those shows that you have on YouTube.
To date, the best episode was the Jody Cook episode I did. It was one of the greatest. I love the episode. Jody's a great guy. I love to use on things. But, of course, like you mentioned, what was Cryptonormal X and Dogman X? Those were two shows that I created in 2017. Cryptonormal X was something that started it all for me. The show, my original viewpoint and my intentions for the show were to create a show that not necessarily was alongside the roots of your typical paranormal show, but at least, do a little bit of difference between me doing a solo show, discussing some paranormal and cryptid events. On top of that, bring on guests. And it was pretty accomplished. I mean, it was always great to meet new people and talk to people and get their views on things of what they've experienced in this world. And the same went for Dogman X, which was, of course, a much more easier show to do because I only had to talk about one thing. And I started it out doing horror stories, but I was going to move on and advance towards interviews. Unfortunately, though, those two shows now are canceled. But I know a lot of people have spoken about if I were to return to the spotlight. And I will say that, there is a project that is currently under wraps. I can't give any information about that yet, but I would suggest that those who are tuning in and listening through the groups to keep your eyes out in the groups in March and April, because there'll be some intel that's going to be dropped. And, for for the new format I'm now on my own personal show, it's something that's going to be a little challenging to do to get people interested in it. But, best of luck. Tune in March and April. We got a special surprise for everybody. And it's going to be the epilogue of one show and the continuation of another. That's all I'm going to say. Hey, Jen, I don't know if you can hear me real quick. I don't mean to cut you off, but I can't hear you through the other side. So I don't know if it was just a small
There,
glitch.
is that better?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Fabulous. Yeah, I remember you talking about the one show that you're going to do. I remember you talking about that, and I'm really looking forward to it. Seeing what you have come up with and what you're going to talk about. I know you have another show that you do as like a job, and it's very interesting. I know I've commented on a few of your posts on that too as well. So looking forward to it.
Yes, the feedback for it, and if I can continue to get big support through the show I'm currently doing, I can continue. I would insist. I would definitely resurrect one of the two YouTubes. But like I mentioned, it's going to be an epilogue of one. It's going to be a continuation of another. I actually got done flipping the coin to figure out which one should I continue, and it'll be surprising to some. Like I said, the groups, it's going to be big come March and April. But I do thank you. I mean, it is important, to continue like with what we do, and it's tough because everyone's doing the same thing now. So it's tough to do a show and get it going, especially when it's the same thing that's been done, and what can make one person's show different that will make people tune into your show type scenario. You know what I mean?
I 110% agree. I absolutely agree. What makes mine different from the next one?
Correct. And I always like to give the audience an interesting viewpoint, and I like to give the audience a nice scare and entertained value, whether both sides of the plate they fix on. But of course, for your show, I think you're doing a fantastic job, by the way. So keep it up. I love to see more.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Well, Barton Wolf has told us hello. So,
hey, Barton, how you doing tonight, brother?
I told him, I said hello. Just wanted to tell him hi. This is something I ask most people that come on the show because, as you know, I started out as a ghost hunter. I still ghost hunt with my team. I ghost hunt. My team consists of ghost hunting, UFOs, cryptids, anything paranormal I do. So this kind of stems from that. When you were younger, did you believe in ghosts, werewolves, vampires, anything like that? Zombies?
It's a very good question because, there are a lot of unexplained things in this world that we can't even bear an understanding of, because it's kind of, it's like trying to convince a bunch of individuals about, Roswell, or convincing them of the existence of the Sasquatch. It's hard to get a lot of people intrigued by it, but, when I was younger, I personally had a belief that there were things out there that didn't seem eye to eye. And I think a lot of that also has transpired from, your movies, like the vampire movies and the werewolf movies, because it keeps you, and that's kind of where I began with my research was, it makes you wonder, do these things exist? So I personally believe that when I was even younger, that there was a thing out there, because I would also watch television like Unsolved Mysteries and, of course, In Search of. And, I always had that thought of like, well, if people are seeing things out there that are unexplained, and they're coming on these television shows not to gather fame or fortune, but to, share their views, even though it could be worked 50-50 on that comment. But, I personally, when I was younger, definitely believed that there was some unknown out there. And I mean, it's crazy to think at a young age, you're this little kid and you think that, but it's, for me, I've always left my mind to be open-minded and not closed-minded.
Sorry, I was coughing. I agree. I always knew there was something out there as well. I saw an elemental when I was like 4. It was looking in the window at me. So that was my first experience, and it just kind of went from there. And my kids, they know things are out there. So I agree. There's so much out there. You don't know if it's true, if it's not true. There's so many legends and history, especially in the Native American culture.
Absolutely. And God bless when you were at a young age to see an elemental. That must have been very scary for you.
It was odd. It was looking in the window, and I can still see it. And it was just looking in the window, and I was like, what is that thing? I wasn't afraid, but I was more curious than anything. And I've not seen anything like that since.
Elementals are scary, I'll tell you. I've heard all the stories, and I would never want to run into one, especially a Dogman elemental.
Oh, geez. Yeah, we'll go there soon about the Dogman. So have you had any personal encounters with ghosts?
When I first started doing interviews, I had spoken about an incident that occurred to me when I was, it happened about several years ago. I was at a friend's house, and I had mentioned that there was a banging going on in some cabin at my friend's house. Now, of course, after I've spoken about that, it was on my mind that for the longest time, I went to go take a look at the place, and I didn't get any background history on it, but one thing for sure is that the place is a very airy feeling. So I don't have an EMT or electronic magnetic field, an EMF, or anything like that to get a sensor on what was in the place, but you could sense it through your mind, and you can easily omit a piece of energy in your brain that can deny any type of scary or intimidating presences. But when your mind sets off a signal that this place is dangerous, you need to get out of here now. That was the energy I was feeling from myself when I went to go visit this place over the fall of actually a few months ago. And I personally, that would be the most closest experience I've ever had. I mean, for all I know, maybe the situation was just someone opening a cabinet, but I mean, there was nobody down there in the kitchen when this occurred, so it was a pretty scary situation for me. But like I've mentioned, I like to keep an open mind. I don't like to think alongside the closed-minded box. But but when I went to go visit there a few months ago, I was it was a terrifying feeling. So definitely, I personally believe I did have a bit of a small encounter with a ghost or something. I don't know. As for Bigfoots or Dogmen or any other cryptids out there, and even paranormal with demons and other things like that, I've never had an encounter. I never want to. Maybe with a Sasquatch, but with the Dogman or a demon, I don't ever want to be put in the same room with one. I'll tell you that.
I've actually, I've not encountered a demonic entity yet. I say yet. But I've been getting, well, I'm not the only one around here. There's a couple other teams that's been getting requests for investigations about demonic entities lately. And I actually just got one last week. So we'll see how that goes. I have people I can refer her to if it is demonic. And because I don't handle that stuff.
Right.
And I think you always second guess yourself when you first start seeing spirit. I still think to myself, it was just a couple days ago. The little one that's 2, he said, there's a monster. And he pointed towards my bedroom. And I happened to walk in there and I saw a full figure of it look like a man standing there.
Wow.
And I'm like, did I really see that? So I'm still I see it, but then again, did I really see it? But it's just odd that he said there's a monster in there. And then I saw that. So I still second guess myself. So and I've been doing this for years.
I personally think people should always have a second guess when they do this type of research because, you never know what you're going to run into. And the idea that a 2-year-old sees this entity, it's a scary sight. It is, no kid I never would, even for my own kids, the day I do have them finally, never to run into one demonic entity. And if that makes you wonder if they're looking for researchers, investigators for demonic entities, that there's a lot going on. It's not just if people are backing out of it, or there's a lot more to it. And I'm more into the cryptid field than I am paranormal. But I mean, from people I've spoken to, they've always come back saying that, you know, it's a very terrifying experience entering a house trying to talk to ghosts.
I agree. I know a couple of demonologists, and the one actually showed me a video, and it was crazy. And right after he showed us the video, the lady called him, and it had started attacking her again.
Wow.
That was a scary day.
That's the scary.
I just don't know how to describe my reaction. It really makes you think. If that makes sense.
Oh, it does. It does. You know, there is no. I personally don't think there is a reaction, because I see it most of just adrenaline and a very scary scenario. You know, your mind is thinking the other way around, even though another part of your mind would say to yourself, maybe I should take a closer look. But your other signals telling you to just, you know, go with your gut instinct and just either get out of there, or how you can handle the situation without making a dangerous suggestion. You know what I mean? It's a very scary type scenario. But for me personally, until the day I do go and do a ghost hunt, you know, my mindset on it won't be as linked as what you have, because you've had experience for the longest time and you know what's going on. And you've probably visited scary places that for you personally, it's probably made you second, like, wonder and think to yourself, why do I do this stuff?
I actually had the scary encounter the first time I went to Ohio State Reformatory Prison. I had something trying to get inside of me. And I went out and grounded myself, and I actually went back in. And I wasn't attacked again. And I will be making my third trip back there this summer. And if you can ground yourself and center yourself and protect yourself, this is just me. I don't recommend anyone do it. But I've learned a lot from the time I started doing this professionally to 2018. I told you you'd probably hear him.
Yes, I did.
He's probably fighting with his sister.
There you go.
Sibling that's Xander. So we talked about ghosts, and I know you're interested in Dogman. You mentioned you've never seen a Bigfoot, correct?
Correct.
Have you ever even thought you've seen one?
Maybe
to make yourself wonder?
It's interesting, because when I was because I like to do exploring. I do a lot of urban exploring. I also like to go ahead and explore areas. And, you know, like I mentioned with that visitation to the house where I thought I had a ghost encounter, or what I believe was to be a ghost. You know, I visit places and I wonder to myself, because, of course, you not only just got to look out for the Sasquatch, but you also got to look out for bears, cougars, mountain lions, if they're in the area. And, you know, I always make sure my surroundings are as 100% tinted and protected than the 99% that's unprotected. And, you know, I feel that sometimes that there is something out there that it's either watching me or stalking me, but I don't get the presence of that it is a threat. But if anything, it's probably just analyzing me and it proceeds to walk off. But I've never had a Sasquatch encounter. But as I mentioned prior, I wouldn't mind having one rather than having a Dogman encounter. That's for sure.
I agree. But I actually saw a Bigfoot last fall across the road in front of me. And then I've heard, and I've told you about these, but I have the recording of the Ohio Bigfoot. And then I've heard the growls of a Dogman on the roof of my mom's house, which is where I'm at right now. And then I saw one across the road go around the corner of her neighbor's house. And I've told you about those stories, and I've told you about Caden's encounters with Dogmen. And some of them are scary, and some of them are just interesting. They just kind of stand back and watch it a lot.
Yeah, you know, I remember when you were telling me this, and I was like, I was actually pretty intrigued because when you mentioned about what your son had seen with this creature, I was blown away because I was like, and the way it's acting towards him, you know, I was intrigued by it because I was like, maybe, you know, some of them are there to protect and they're not there to do what we've always heard about, whether you've listened to the Vic Cundiff show, you know, where they eyewitnesses talk about these encounters and these creatures that, you know, are intimidating and it gives off a bad vibe. So I was pretty intrigued by what your son had seen, and then for what you have mentioned about you seeing a Sasquatch. Now I want to ask you this:
Oh, go ahead.
when you're, I'm assuming from what we've mentioned, that would you actually like if you were to go into the woods, like, and Sasquatch, of course, was not a threat to you, would you feel comfortable around a Sasquatch if it was watching you than appear to be a dog man watching you?
Personally, I think I'd be nervous around both, just for the sheer fact that I'm all excited that I finally get to see one. And I would wonder if it would try to interact with me. Like the ones in Ohio, they interact with Caden, the Sasquatch do. And my daughter just came in. And one night, I don't know if I told you this, but he was over there and he was running and ran across the creek to get back to our aunt's cabin or house. And he started to fall. And it sounded like something was running towards him to help him. And when he got up, it stopped in its tracks and you couldn't hear it anymore. And he sees them watching in our other aunt's windows. And I personally, this is just my theory, is that they have seen him grow up and it's a family unit that's there. And they've always, you know, they don't bother the family doesn't bother them. I think they've watched him grow up, so they've accepted him, if that makes sense, and they watch out for him.
I mean, and that's something too that's interesting because you hear some reports about a Sasquatch or yeah, and even in Dogman. You know, I interviewed a woman who reported that when she was much younger, there was a Dogman that she said felt like it was more female, that treated her and catered to her as if she was a human baby. And you know, obviously this isn't, you know, about growing up, but I mean, the concept of that these creatures have a connection to us and that they pick certain people, in this case, your son, who had seen the Sasquatch and know of them as well as Dogman, and that they're there to watch over him. And it's actually, in a way, it's very fascinating because, you know, it's almost like the tale of a gorilla, and it's, you know, its human owner, it's the person that's raised them, how there's a strong connection between ape and human or dog and human. You know, it's like man's best friend. But you know, I think it's interesting that that isn't it, and you know, it is something that it's pretty intriguing, and I see it happening more now. I think with certain people than it was obviously back in the day because we didn't have cell phones, we didn't have social media back then. So now I see it coming clearer, and it's an interesting thing, and that's something that I would be very proud of because, you know, it's not like you have a serious threat on your hands. You have something that's protecting, but at the same time is admiring, and it really is intrigued by your family. On top of that, I wouldn't say a protector per se, but more like someone who is definitely watching over and would want to make sure that he isn't in any harm. I think that if something was running towards him, it was obviously there to make sure he was okay, rather than there and trying to stir up a situation, especially because if you were near, I don't think the situation would have been anything hectic. I personally, from what you said, it might sound as if maybe it was just going to try to help him up.
I do too. And he thinks that as well. And he said that he actually saw a juvenile Sasquatch hiding in a bush over there. And it jumped out and screamed, kind of like did their roar, or he said it was a scream, and ran away and took off. I got a cough. Hold on a second. Sorry about that.
No worries.
But he's had that encounter. He's actually ran into a dog man over there. But I had those pictures that I had shared from back behind my mom's house when I saw something watching us from the woods. And I'm not sure if I showed you the picture from the football game at the high school last fall, but you can see I was just sitting across from the woods and the bleachers, and out of nowhere, I got that overwhelming feeling that I was being watched. And I started taking pictures of the woods behind the visitors' seats. And you can see an outline of something squatted down. And you know how you'll squat and your knees will go out. That's exactly what this looks like. And you can see it in this picture when I lighten it up. But I've only ever had that on a ghost hunt. Like if something is there and it's overwhelming and I have to look and it's usually there. This was just that feeling that night. Have you ever been out and about and somebody staring at you and seeing what you're doing?
Oh,
or
yeah.
The hairs on the back of your neck start to stand up? That's the kind of feeling I had that night. And it was just out of nowhere.
I've never seen that photograph. I'd love to, when you get a chance, share it. I'd love to see it. I think that's the first time I'm actually hearing about it, if I'm not mistaken, from what you've told me. Definitely love to see it for what it is, because I get that feeling, like I mentioned, when I was in that house, big time. The hairs on the back of my neck stand up, and my adrenaline starts pumping. So for you, that must have been very scary, but also interesting at the same time.
It was, and he happened to be on that side of the football field at the same time. It was very odd because I happened to see him. And it was kind of straight across from me where we were sitting at. And then he would have been to my right, further down towards the end of the field. But it was just overwhelming. And I thought, I'll just take pictures. And I texted him. I said, there's a dog man over there. He goes, yeah, I know. I said, how do you know? He goes, I heard it.
Wow.
And he said he'll be sitting in class at the back of the building where you can see the woods, and he will have a really strong, overwhelming feeling that something's watching him there as well. And
go on.
Go ahead.
Oh no.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say that that's a very terrifying feeling, but I think I want to also ask this: is he comfortable? Like, he's grown. Like, he's comfortable with what's been going on. Like, he's chosen to accept this, and he knows that this is, not fantasy. That this is actual reality for his age.
Yeah, he actually does. He goes on ghost hunts with me, but he's more interested in the Dogman and the Sasquatch side of it compared to his sister. She's like, I'll just go ghost hunt with you. So he's more into the cryptids. And one night we were sitting in the living room. It's been a couple months ago. You know how it took a really long time to snow. So we're sitting, it was before Christmas. We were sitting in the living room. It was about 11 o'clock at night. And we got this overwhelming feeling that something was outside. And he goes, there's a fathead outside, which we'll talk about that later. And then within the next 5 minutes, you heard this boom and felt it on the ground. I have no idea what that was. It was just very, very odd. And we both knew they were around. And anymore, like when I could tell when they're here and when they're not here, I would go outside real early in the morning at like 6 o'clock and scrape when we would stay with my mom, because I have issues getting in and out of my driveway at home because I live right on a highway. So they plow it in. So when it would snow real heavy here, I would stay at her house so I could easily get in and out of the driveway here. She lives in a subdivision. And I would be out in the morning at like 6 o'clock, shoveling the driveway, or really late at night when I get home from work, and it would be pitch black out. I never once thought about them when I was out there shoveling. I never felt like I was being watched. But as it started warming up, I told him a few weeks ago, I said, you realize they're back? He goes, yeah, I heard them last night. And I can tell anymore when they're around and when they're not around. And when it warms up, they come back around. And when it snows, they leave. If that makes sense.
It's scary. That's a very scary sight. But I mean, like I've mentioned, I think personally it works for the best. I mean, at least he's grown to accept it, and obviously, I mean, for that. But to hear that kind of bang and to hear what's going on outside, I mean, I would be, for one, not want to go out there and mess with it, especially if it's a fathead.
It felt like it was like right out in the back of her yard off the patio. It was that close. And I mean, you could feel the house shook. And he's like, don't go look. I'm like, why not? He said, don't do it. I was like, okay. And there's nights they like to bother him a lot in the summer when I'm not around. Last year when I went to Louisville to Waverly Hills, he called me that Friday night and said, can you come home? I said, I'm on my way to Louisville. I said, I can't come home. Well, they're here, and they were knocking on his bedroom window, and you could hear it. And I haven't told you this part either. We had went to the grocery store in January. No, it was December, right before Christmas. And it was December 13th. I had Kane pick them up, and we went back to the grocery store. And we dropped the groceries off at my house. And I have a security light by the back deck. And that security light was on. I said, well, what has been around here to kick that on? And Kane looks at me and he goes, Dogman. I said, that came to my mind too. So we took the groceries in. I brought him to my mom's. We dropped off what she needed. And I went back home. And we got out of the car, and I was carrying Xander. Ariana was walking behind me. And I have a metal roof in my house. And I heard 3 distinct taps. And you know how you tap on metal with a sharp object? And it makes that ping noise? I heard 3 distinct pings. Ariana said, hold on a second. Sorry. And Ariana said, I heard something too. And I've been woken up at my house by something on the roof and on the side of the house as well. So I think they're here, and then they come over to my house too. But that was really, really creepy to hear just 3 distinct knocks right above my head on a metal roof. There was nothing there. But it was just like, and that was it. But that's my creepy story for lately.
That's interesting. I mean, it feels as if there is a mixture of heck and curiosity going on. Sounds. That's it's interesting how that's all played out in the duration of the past few months, and how they're continuing. It seems as if they're either trying to say, "Hey, come outside with us," type ordeal, or they're just curious of you guys, and they want to kind of get to know you guys a little bit more. But like I've mentioned, I personally would not want to wake up, and well, for me, I wouldn't want to wake up and take a look outside my bedroom window and see a pair of amber eyes looking at me with a German Shepherd's head banging on my window. Because personally, if I'm half asleep, my reaction would be a complete freak out, and I'd probably find something to throw something at it. But with my luck, I'd probably piss it off. Excuse my language. Just that would be personally for me. That would my reaction, but like I've mentioned, I think you and your family have handled the situation perfectly at bay, and that it is an interesting scenario. I mean, I'd love to hear more in the future too.
1 second. I just wish I could get rid of this cough, but
it happened though.
I was just like, please go away. I've had it for 3 weeks. But he did tell me it's been 2 or 3 months ago. It was still kind of nice out. We keep our aunt's dog a lot. He brings her over to my mom's and she'll stay like 3 and 4 days. My aunt works real early in the morning, so she spends the day with mom or, you know. So she's been coming over and staying. He'll take her outside to go to the bathroom about 11 o'clock. And this is a newer development in the whole Dogman story too, is that she likes to go at the corner of the yard. And he was outside with her and he turned around and he heard a growl. They like to sit on top of the roof on the back where it's dark and there's no lights and peer over and watch him and me both when we're outside. Like we'll go sit out on the back patio. And my mom has like a little awning thing over her table and stuff. So you really can't see what's above you. And we've heard growls out there and we both took off in the house and left the dog out and felt bad about it. And this certain time he was out there and she was doing her business and he was at the end of the house in the corner where there's absolutely no lights. And he heard a growl. He turned around and it swiped at him. Like he came flying in the house and I happened to be here that night and he flew in the house, woke me up and said, "It's outside. It tried to grab me." I told him, I said, if it wanted you, it would have had you.
Oh, yeah.
So I think it was just trying to get his attention. And he seems to think it's a male juvenile.
Yeah, juveniles tend to do that type of behavior. I've noticed trying to stir havoc, and you might actually have a juvenile situation too. The banging on the roof, one thing. And then, of course, always trying to heckle while the adults, wherever they're at, I would think in many cases, it would have been much more brutal, I think, if it wasn't a juvenile. But, of course, I don't know. But I will say that it does sound like a juvenile, and it does sound much like there was a lot of space and a lot of it was a scary situation, big time. But definitely, I think a juvenile, because I mean, I would think an adult would be much more mature and smart about the situation, and definitely outsmart the human individual that they're tampering with in no time. I've noticed that too with a lot of reports that the adults are more aggressive, I think, when it comes to that. But juveniles like to be much more heckling. They can still carry out the powerhouse and the same animosity and strength that they can do in an adult, except that I think an adult would definitely be the big powerhouse that can destroy big time. But luckily, no one was harmed and everyone was okay.
I think it just wanted his attention and to say, "Hey, I'm back. Did you miss me?" I do too. Well, he figured out they were back. And I don't think he missed him right then. But I've told you several things that's happened it was well before Christmas. I was sitting in the garage and his friend lived down the street and he walked her home. Well, she walked home and he followed to make sure she got there okay. And I was sitting in the garage and it's really funny because Dottie was with me again. It's a Dottie dog. And she was with me again. We were sitting in the garage waiting for him to get back. And I kept hearing noises outside. And I was like, oh, please, don't peek around the corner. Just do not peek around the corner of the garage and look in here at me. Because I knew what it was. And then you heard these nails just... Did you hear that?
Yes.
It sounded just like that down the corner of the garage. Like right down the siding. So I quickly shut the garage. Now, if that was
Sounds
a
like
ghost, if it was a ghost, I would have went out there. But that night, I was not. Nope, I'm good.
The Dogmen have a big fascination with the Freddy Krueger movies and love to smack their nails against something to scare the living hell out of people.
I know when he's the one night. Well, when I was in Louisville, and he had that one come up to the window and start knocking. He was watching Transformers that night. I said, well, shut the movie off and go to bed. He goes, no. He goes, I love Transformers. I'm not going to shut it off. It can watch the window with me. I was like, okay. But yeah, I really do. I think it's a male juvenile.
I think too. It sounds more juvenile.
I think so too. And I was going to tell you about when I saw the one going around the corner across the street. It's the corner of the garage. It would be, I got to think. My mom's house faces that way. So, and theirs would face this way. So their garage would be on the far corner. And they leave their trash can out there. And the night I happened to look out, I saw this arm. And you know how you'll walk and you'll swing your arms?
Right.
This thing, or it kind of reminded me of how Patty was walking in that film, and swinging the arms. Well, this arm was out like this, going around the garage, and I saw like from here down, and these long nails, like you could see claws at the end. I'm not making this shit up, believe me, because I looked, and I was like, did I really see that? And I looked again, and I was like, Caden, I said, I just saw it across the street going around the corner of their house. And then within the next few days, I had seen on my way to work. Let me back up. His friend had actually had this encounter in June at his house, which is, I don't know, 5 miles away. And I actually saw the Sasquatch across the railroad tracks from his friend's house. That's where I saw the Sasquatch across the road. And I found out over the weekend that there's a park in the area that we're going to do a ghost hunt at when it warms up. And I was told there is also most likely cryptids in that park too. So that's going to be an interesting night.
Very much so. Best of luck with the investigation. Hope all goes well.
I'm really curious what cryptids are out there, because my friend that told me about it, she said you could hear they were walking on all fours, and they were not bipedal, they were quadrupedal. She said you could hear it walking on all fours, and it was heavier than a fox. So she said, I really think there's some cryptids out there. I was like, fabulous. Let's set up some trail cams.
The best you can do. It's gonna be interesting. I hope all goes well with it, though. Hope love to hear the outcomes of it.
I'm looking forward to that one, and it's really close to home. So and I think our Dogman travel. I live about 20 minutes away from Michigan, so I think they travel between here and possibly Ohio and to Michigan. I think they have a little corridor that runs through here. That's just
I agree. I think there is a connector with the way the woods are set up and how they are. There is a path they follow. A very scary one at best, but it is interesting. That's a big deep analysis that we'll eventually in the future figure out more of.
really. And what do you think about them traveling with the food? Like they migrate with the season, with things that, like deer season, where there's more deer, there's more dogmen, or in the summer when there's more fresh vegetables, fresh berries and things like Sasquatch do. You think they travel like that? They go where the food's at?
Well, it's interesting because I've always been told that the fall and winter which is of course the colder seasons for us, that they are seen more often. And I think it has a lot to do with the migration. They migrate and they tense with the food. The food supply is big because, unfortunately, in our society nowadays, we're cutting down more trees and building more homes than keeping and thought process of our wildlife. And it's getting tighter for these creatures to hide, and especially when there's other creatures out there, because their environments are getting destroyed by the entire by the whole lumberjack stage of time, and the whole wilderness, building more and chopping down more, and then of course building less and trying to invest. So I personally do think that at the same time they do choose the food, that they do follow the food during the summer. I think the sightings are not as much, but I do sense that, there are people who see things in the woods, from a ripped apart deer to a ripped apart raccoon, and there's no explanation. And some people might claim they might have some food that they grow in their garden stolen, and they will sit there and wonder why. There was a report of somebody who reported that they have a lot of deer in the area, and sometimes these creatures can tend to come into these developments and run towards the next outer length of the woods. I have never heard the reports, but it wouldn't be too surprising if a deer is crossing by trying to escape something, and breaks into you know the wilderness, the like a development or a neighborhood, to escape something. And it wouldn't be no surprise if one of these creatures came out of the blue and chased it, but then stops to think, well, I'm in human territory with people out, they can look at me, and that wouldn't be a good scenario. But going back to the question, I do think I think it's two things. I think it's migration, to get out of an environment that easily, and I think they have the intelligence to know that they're in an environment that will either be torn down or there'll be more human population added to. But at the same time, I also think if they're in an area where there's not a lot of food, they'll migrate towards another area that has more food, and possibly run into some of them, of their kind, and then of course chase in a group for food. It's the typical wolf pack herd, of wild dogs type theory we're talking. So I think both migration and a source for food do play a huge role in that question.
Well, I do have a kind of odd story for you. You were talking about them running, like deer running to get away.
Right.
I was on my way home from where I used to live at. And I was coming down the highway, and it's a busy highway. And it's cornfields. You come over this big bridge and go down. And I saw 3 deer. I was going north, so it would have been on the west side of the road. I saw 3 deer standing there across. And I slammed on my brakes. And thank God nobody was behind me, because they would have hit me and that would have been a mess. And I was like, okay, why are these deer starting to run? And the first thing that popped in my head is, what's chasing them? And then I looked to the other side of the road, which would have been the east side, and there was a deer laying over there dead. But still, it really made me wonder, were they trying to get to that deer that had gotten hit or got hit? Or was something chasing them? Because there's also woods in the back of that cornfield. So I stopped, and, Jody popped into my head. As soon as I stopped, he says, get your camera out. Have your camera ready on your phone. If you see something, take a picture. I was ready that night. Jody was right there in my head, and I started looking around, and I had my camera ready, and there was nothing that I can see where my lights were shining that would have been anything out of the ordinary. But the way the deer were acting, because they wouldn't turn around and run from my car, they kept hanging out trying to cross the road. So it really made me wonder if something was chasing them. So I really started looking that night. And now I look every time I drive through there.
That is truly terrifying, I will say. I mean, because, let's just say they were running away from something, and something easily could have snuck up behind your car and it would have been a very scary scenario. But you could tell when a deer is in fear and it's running, and if they're running in a pack, that they're either, it sounds like they were running from something. And because it's not every day you have three deer just run together and they're getting away from something, and it's not. That's what I think.
That was my exact thought. And thanks a lot, because I didn't think about it coming up behind the car. Should have been there with me.
I'll tell you what, I mean, I hear all these stories about people who are in these highways, and I never want people to have their cars break down on these highways, and especially if it's heavily wooded. And, you got people out there who will do that exact thing just to wait for the whole thing of like, oh, well, I hear about this Bigfoot thing running around. I'm going to go find it myself. So, and then you got people who just go out there and they're not prepared. Now, I'm not saying that you weren't prepared, but I mean, when it comes to the possibility that if there's three deer running away, it's always just, a caution. You never want to, hear that a researcher was injured or something happened to that researcher while they were researching, because it would be pretty sad. Because, it's a scary, when we practice and when we look up, it's a very scary field, because, it's not like you can easily get harmed. No question. But, you got to go with your gut and, what you were thinking, you as a researcher, you want to just see what's out there. And that's a good thing. You don't want to, live up to what you researched and say, well, I'm just going to move along. But and that was an important factor. But of course, as always, for me, because I hear all the stories, I'm just very cautious. Even if I'm driving around a highway, I just look around like crazy. And the thing is too, a lot of people, they don't have enough time to hit the brakes on a deer. And it was lucky because, a deer, I think, could have done a hell of a lot more damage to your car than a dog man.
It could have jumped over it. But yeah, that was another thing, is there more deer? So I stopped. And like I said, it was coming off this bridge, and I was so glad nobody was behind me, because I just stopped. But that was an interesting night. But I really, truly think something was chasing them that night. I really do. And it's a wooded area. There's cornfields. It's just, there's one stop sign in the town it's outside of. So if that tells you how small it is, it was really rural. But shall we go on to the next question?
Yes.
What made you decide to start researching dogmen?
Well, it's an interesting story. We're going to go back nearly close to a decade ago. I was only just a young individual trying to learn life. And as we're going back to the second question about, the belief of that, if these creatures do, like, when you were much younger, goblins and werewolves and vampires and ghosts and whatnot. For me, I was watching these movies. I was watching everyone's favorites, like The Howling and American Werewolf in London. And that was where it came to me, where I was like, I always had that thought of belief of these creatures existing. So I went to go ahead on my computer, typed it up. I was like, werewolves in real life. I was brought to Europe. And then I ran into Linda Godfrey, one of her websites. It was actually the current website, the same website she's had, The Beast of Bray Road. And I was looking up these encounters, and I remember that there was this B movie that came out a few years prior called The Beast of Bray Road. And I was like, is this the same thing? Is there a connection to this? Obviously, one is based on true events and one is genuine. And I looked it up and I was like, okay, so people are seeing this creature that resembles a werewolf, but not a werewolf, because there's no depictions of a transformation. There's no depiction of, ripped clothing. Of course, this was when I first started doing research, so I didn't get that far. And then I was introduced to Steve Cook's Michigan Dogman website. And then, of course, there was the infamous Gable film, which has now come to light as being a fabricated piece of footage, even though that there are a lot of people, including myself, who are a little still 50-50 on it about the
I'm one too.
About it. And that's basically where it began for me. And then I took a break after a few years, and then Vic Cundiff came out with Dogman Encounters and Jody with the NADP. And I was like, all right, it's all coming full circle. It's becoming a phenomenon, and I'm researching this phenomenon, and it's pretty damn interesting.
I agree. I agree 110%. I'm going to admit this. I've still not seen the Beast of Boggy Creek. I know I'm a terrible, terrible researcher. Everyone else has seen it except me.
Very, very good.
It's one of those things, if it's not right in front of me, I'll forget about it till I'm like, oh yeah, I need to watch that. And then I'll forget about it by the time I can get to the PlayStation to look it up on YouTube. One day I'll get to it. I just have to make a mental note. Well, you're still young as it is, so you're not old like me. So you've got a lot of research years yet.
I feel old. I ain't gonna lie.
Oh please, you're like a quarter of my age, I swear. I think you're half my age. So, but I'm an old woman. But we won't go there. What is the most, you haven't had any personal experiences. So what account that you've had, I can't even get out. What is the most prominent account that you've heard that sticks out the most in your mind?
There is one, and I spoke about this on Vic's show. It was the account that my one friend had in the Pine Barrens, which really freaked me out, even though I wasn't there for it. But I literally, when he told me the story, because this is a friend of mine who I would never see to fabricate or BS a thing, because he not a big outdoorsman like me, but he is, he's done quadding and he's went off-roading, so he knows his environment due to all what he's done. So he was out with a friend and he was talking, and he heard a weird something like a presence, felt unclear to him. So him and his buddy got a flashlight and they went out. Now, you can only have certain access to certain parts in this environment because it is heavily government guarded. There is some places where you cannot gain access to. I remember I spoke with a woman, not going off subject, that said that there's a lot of Satanist cults. And of course, if you haven't figured out what the Pine Barrens, for all the listeners, and of course, Pine Barrens is the infamous home of the Jersey Devil. And so, of course, the whole folklore behind the Pine Barrens and the idea that there is something out there really does appeal to the eye. So he went out and he took a look, and then when he shined his light on something that makes sense to him, he saw this creature, and it had the most demonic face. He literally said, it was like he said, he was like, I literally saw hell right in front of me. And when I went to how he described the face, and it's weird how this is going to tie in, but after I spoke to him, because he broke down crying, telling me this thing right in my room, and I felt so bad. I literally, because I showed him an image of something that was ghostly, which was the infamous LBL sketch by Bartonoli, and he was like, that looks so much like the thing I saw, except that the way it was grinning at me, and it looked like it was like a venom grin, which is a super villain in comic book, but he just, that's the way he mentioned it on top of the LBL sketch that I showed him, and then of course he mentioned it. I was like, that's pretty freaky, and today he has not set foot into the woods, and that encounter was actually a couple of years ago, so he hasn't stepped 1 foot in the woods since, which is scary. And to this day, he even said to me, he was like, I refuse to go into the woods alone, and I refuse to enter the woods without a weapon.
Wow, I feel bad for him. I really do. That's a horrifying experience he had. Absolutely horrifying. And you mentioned that he said it was demonic and had Venom's grin. Ariana actually saw an entity when we lived about an hour and a half from here that she said looked like the scary Spider-Man, which would be Venom.
Ah, that's interesting. It's like he ties
Now,
in everything. That's interesting.
go ahead.
That must have been terrifying, but also, I mean, I honestly, if I had seen, let's just say, if I did see a demonic entity that had the look of Venom, I would have either literally, I would have sat there and given it a high five, because personally, I'm a big comic book guy. He's one of my favorites. But obviously, if I ever saw something like that, I would also be pretty terrified. That must have been pretty scary, though. I mean, for the reaction, very scary scenario. I'm pretty sure that right there can really wake you up and bring you down.
She wasn't very old. She was maybe 4 when she saw this. Let me think. 2000. She was born in 2007. She was 5, and she started seeing this at a house we lived in, and she would see it, and you would hear it as well. So it's really odd how he saw the same. Can you hold on a second? Sorry.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Sorry.
That's okay.
They were being very loud. I just think it's odd that he saw that and then it grinned at him. That right there would have scared the living shit right out of me. Don't say it. He likes to repeat what I say.
There you go.
That would have just completely scared me to death. Hi.
Hello there.
So, you mentioned the Pine Barrens. You haven't visited there yourself, have you?
I have, and it's a very interesting experience because if you are not familiar with a lot of heavily wooded territory that's also guarded, and you hear with permit and warning signs, it's a very experience. But I visited, fortunately, never seen anything, but it is a good place to explore. And I mean, if people are from the area and they do want to take a look, go right ahead. But I highly suggest you just look up the rules and regulations first, and get a group of friends and have a good time. It's a very fun place, but at the same time, it's very creepy. But unfortunately, I wasn't able to see anything.
There was an episode on, was it Monsters and Mysteries, that they had an encounter with something in the Pine Barrens, and its claws actually ripped into the truck. Do you remember that one?
No,
that episode. Do you watch it very often?
I have to look it up. I haven't watched a lot of. I've only watched Netflix and Hulu. I have to look it up.
This was when I could afford cable a few years ago. So I was watching a Monsters and Mysteries marathon and happened to see that one. And I was like, well, that's interesting, because if you watch my presentation, I cover the Jersey Devil on my cryptids presentation that's on my team's YouTube channel. And I thought, well, that's what I've been talking about. And they said they called it a scream, and it came down and swooped towards them, and then they had claw marks along the on their truck. That's why I asked if you had seen anything out there, because every time I hear about the Pine Barrens, I think of this episode of that show.
That's really scary depict, man. I'll have to take a look. I've never heard or seen anything like that. I have to take a look at Monsters and Mysteries. That's interesting. It would sound more like it was a Jersey Devil type thing. I know the Jersey Devil tends to, scrape and do things similar to that. I mean, obviously, it has the claws that could literally pick a human being up. So, it is. Take a look at that. You saw this a couple years ago, you said, so it's probably not. It's definitely a few years old, but I'll have to take a look. Very creepy too. Interesting at the same time.
Give me 1 second. I'm sorry. Oh, sorry. She's making him scream. She likes it agitating.
No worries, it happens. It's no.
Well, we've already just stop. I'll go to the next question I have for you. That's not Dad. Can you say hi, Chris?
Hi, Chris.
There. How are you, young man?
Some people believe these are demonic creatures. What do you think about this theory? Do you think they're demonic? I personally think they're flesh and blood creatures because they bleed and they have been killed.
Right. And, this is a very interesting question, also a very controversial question. And I'll do my best to not confuse and to get my best depiction on it. The thing with the demonic talk about it, is that the people who claim this they automatically assume if it's demonic that this has red eyes. And that's not the case, because I've seen red-eyed animals before and they've never charged or attacked me. It's just the eye shine, or maybe it's just, something with their eye color. So that's one thing I want to point out is that I don't think that it's demonic because of an eye shine if it's red. Personally, there's red-eyed cats, there's red-eyed dogs, and definitely that would be a red-eyed Bigfoot or a Dogman, and even a red-eyed moth. Well, Mothman is kind of out of the question because he has red eyes, but when it comes to the demonic talk of it, we talk about LBL, the whole tragic story of a family being ripped apart by a man-wolf or something resembles that, or a demon. And the thing is that I don't classify them as demons because, like you've mentioned, flesh and blood, they've been killed, they've bled before. A demon wouldn't bleed, or a demon wouldn't, feel pain or die. A demon would continue to do what it has to do until the mission's complete. So personally, I do believe people do have run-ins with dogmen that tend to be superior and a dominating force, which I would recommend would be the adults. I personally believe that juveniles are more seen than adults, but also adults, no question, have been sighted and seen as well. But when it comes to demons, I don't think they're demonic. And as you've mentioned, the points basically validate itself that there are, ones that have been shot. There have been ones that have been injured, bled, and like I've mentioned, demons don't bleed nor die. So, I personally see them more as flesh and blood, and I like to try to omit the demonic presence of it and the supernatural of it because I don't think there's enough evidence that support them to be demonic.
I agree. I don't think they're demonic either. And I agree about the red eye shine. It's light refraction or reflection. Just like when they say they see the yellow eyes, the yellow eye shine. It's the same difference with the red. It's just how the lights reflecting, how much light's available, what type of light you have. And I've noticed too that most of the people who say they're demonic creatures are, I don't remember the guy's name, but I know he's not on the Dogman Facebook pages anymore because he was talking about how they're demonic. And he was a religious fanatic. And a lot of these people I've noticed who say they are religious fanatic. That's just my opinion and my observation. I could be wrong, but I've noticed that. And I don't know if remember the guy or not.
Yeah, she's drawing a blank to me too. I don't recall the guy. I've heard of the situation with him and the religious views on it. But, I also, one thing I wanted to point out was that when it comes to people who are very religious with these creatures, that they'll pray, and praying has worked. I don't always recommend praying because it may never work, but I feel that if these creatures were also demonic, that they would also manifest an energy that would move to be unstable to the human race, and that we would be wiped out and they would be the society if they were demonic, because they could definitely destroy and ruin anything in their path. If they are demonic, they have that energy that they can manifest to be demonic, to easily wipe out some human race or a group of people if they chose to, of course. The same thing goes with Bigfoot.
I agree. I find this theory, the next theory I want to discuss, kind of interesting. Do you think they could be descendants of Anubis?
Same thing with the controversy surrounding that. We talk about this whole thing about where they've come from. I don't like to consider the first official report in Wexford County, 1887, to be the first appearance of them, because I feel they've been cited eons. Native Americans have spoken about them. And I recall when I interviewed Linda Godfrey, she mentioned to me how she was speaking to a Native American council, and the councilmen were very nervous about talking about these creatures for some mysterious reason, whether for protection or the fact that in their religion and what their um, basis of study is that it's a sort of sounding of disrespect if their names are mentioned about what they discovered, because the whole concept. But when we go back to ancient Egypt and the whole god of the underworld, we have seen various inspiration taken from the Anubis that are seen in these creatures: the dog face, the German shepherd's head, and of course the intimidating presence of their muscle and their body structure. So, I do think they are. There is a little theory behind that. We just haven't cracked it yet, because we've always talked about the supernatural side of them, how they can act. The previous question about demonic energy with these creatures, you know, it just stands out to me, and it's something that I'm not 100% on, but I do think that they are descendants of. And we talk about flesh and blood. I also like to see it as when, and I'm not big on religion. I know religion's big in this field with controversy, but let's just say that when God created this world, he put all these creatures in his place that he would want to see roam, and then Dogman could easily be one of them. Now let's talk about the Anubis in ancient Egypt. Surely a descendant and whatever lord or power of the supernatural, and the idea of where the Anubis came from, half man, half dog. And then there's easily could be focused on both ways. So now, not only did I just talk about flesh and blood creation, I'm also talking about supernatural and the demonic creation, or not demonic, but more or less the creation that these were creatures created as a view of intel by another god, and of course from the underworld. So I guess demonic kind of ties into that one as well. But um, it is a very interesting question, but I do personally feel that there is not enough evidence to clarify if they are a descendant of the Anubis. The same thing can be applied with aliens and UFOs if they are an alien race, which we'll get into a little bit because there's another question about alien race.
Yes, there is. We were talking, and I've been scribbling little notes as we go. The Wolfpack episode. What was it?
Paranormal Witness?
Was it? I'm sorry?
Paranormal Witness?
Yes, that's it. Why was I thinking of The Haunting? But the Wolfpack episode. Have you heard a lot of there being orbs or lights before these creatures appear?
Big time. It's interesting because I've not some reports that I've listened to on Vic's show, but also reports that are written in an evidence folder as well. People will see orbs or a mysterious source of a phenomenon called, what I like to call, as in the light calling, which is a type of phenomenon. And I've noticed this has actually happened in upstate New York. I remember reading the story. There is a report about these flashing lights these campers have seen. And these campers in their report noticed that there is this creature that came after them and nearly attacked them and killed them. But they were also running towards the lights. I've noticed that these mysterious flashing lights have also been seen before an encounter, and there's no explanation to it, which also opens up a new can of worms on the whole supernatural side of these creatures. Now, I personally do believe that these orbs and these lights are seen as energy manifestations for them to come around, and that this is a guidance. But I'm not going to sound too crazy on it because I myself am not 100% sure. But the energy presence, this light calling, that is a phenomenon. And this has only been recent too. I've noticed it's been more effective since the past few years. Um, there's been this big talk about what if there is a light source or an orb manifestation that could manifest these creatures into making their sightings. There are people who have encountered them, have had a weird phenomenon that's occurred after. We've seen this in Mothman encounters where poltergeist attacks and mysterious paranormal happenings have occurred once someone has seen the Mothman. Linda Scarberry, the first eyewitness to come forward with a Mothman case, reported a poltergeist attack after seeing this cryptid, and the Mothman was present. Now let's go back to Dogman. People have reported orbs and flashing lights and mysterious phenomenons of orbs and paranormal activity following a Dogman encounter. So I think it's the source of the lights and the orb aspect of their energy is still on a human being for how long they choose to. So I do believe of the orb and flashing lights phenomenon to be that of an important factor of a Dogman's manifestation.
I've also heard that there is a purple mist that comes with them. Have you heard that theory as well? That
Yep.
They like to call it a portal.
Yeah. It is interesting because there are people who've seen these creatures and they've said, and it's the best depiction I've ever heard of it, was that, there are people who have seen them and then they can see them at 1 second and then the next they vanish. Now, the purple mist has appeared there and there, but if it is a portal, it makes you wonder if there is a presence from the aliens or UFO. And now we're going to talk a little bit on the crazy side and say, but I do believe that this purple mist must be a gateway because, and I got to give credit to the Duffy brothers who have made the show Stranger Things because they really opened up a new gateway to the whole conspiracy theory of the what if factor in the world. The whole interdimension, the third dimension, the interdimensional human, the creature beings, the mist, the unknown world upside down. That there is this thing that is a phenomenon that they are seeing, and that they do go into this mist, this portal, and then when they appear once more, they exit out of the portal, and maybe the flashing lights might be aimed and guided at them reaching another checkpoint. But that's just a theory. But it is interesting. I've heard of the purple mist, and it's a very scary scenario. Beautiful, I bet, but also scary because then the mist would indicate that there's something coming.
Yeah, I agree. That is kind of a scary if you see that mist or even the lights. Now I had talked about fatheads earlier. What do you think of the fathead theory? Do you think that they're controlled by so-called aliens?
Well, the fathead thing is something I've been mixed on. At first, I personally was straight out said 100% alien connection. I had interviewed with a woman who is a spiritual advisor who has had spiritual discussions with Sasquatch, the Mothman, even. And in these discussions, she's never touched Dogman, from what I've gathered as of late. But in the discussion, she mentioned about aliens playing a major factor in our world. And, if these are creatures that are being sent from, of course, from above by aliens, the purpose here is either to be intrigued with the human race or to be curious of the lifestyle we live and get an idea. Now, if these fatheads are coming from an alien race, that they sure have the intelligence. And now, one thing I want to mention is that the fatheads apparently are the invincible, invulnerable, and super soldier type formula that we hear about of a super soldier, a creature that could, or an entity that could be indestructible. Now, I also want to talk about government experimentation. Uh, Let us just say, for example, that if now outside the alien theory, what if these fatheads are genetically modified creatures captured? It's interesting. There's bunkers all the way in LBL uh, that were there and established. I've always seen the bunkers as an open gateway to trap a creature, to capture one, and to get some experimentation on. There is a base in New York, called Plum Island, where a mysterious creature, about a decade ago actually, washed up on shore, and Plum Island was reported to have that creature, even though that they've opened up and said there was no such creature. Now, let us just say that these creatures have been taken, these dogmen, to these facilities to be tested on. Maybe they're genetically modified to create the super soldier formula. And let us just say, at the process of that they have this intelligence that they were rejected of, and that this intelligence is them roaming in the wild. There's reports that adult and regular sized dogmen do not touch base with these creatures, that they will kill them. So it is interesting. I personally, if they are an alien race, I do want to know their presence being here. If it is a genetically modified experiment and they've advanced the head of the creature for intelligence, it is a scary sight. And I would wonder, but I'm 50-50 on it.
I'm sorry, I was coughing. What was the last thing you said?
No problem. I said that it is a very scary sight if these are government experimented creatures that have been rejected because they were failures in the super soldier program, but also if they are aliens, alien race that are being descended down from aliens, I'm curious to know what their purpose on Earth is. So I'm 50-50 on it.
Yeah, I'm not real sure. I'm not real sure I believe the whole they're controlled by aliens. I have watched that video, and I personally can't see the thing on the supposed fathead shoulder. I've watched it several times. Do you know the video I'm referring to?
The Bigfoot on prey video where it depicts a creature kneeling.
No, it's by Scott Carpenter.
Oh, okay.
They it and when they zoom in on it, it looks like a dinosaur from Jurassic Park.
Yes, 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 I recall.
Yeah, I'm so iffy on that because I cannot see it in the video at all. So I'm not really into that fathead theory. I think,
Yeah, me neither. But it's interesting. But for me, I'd have to be 100% convinced of evidence. You know.
I agree. And that's why we do this, to find out the truth or try to see the truth.
Oh yeah.
Now, my next question. Yeah. Do you think that Dogman and Bigfoot can live in harmony?
Uh, it's interesting because it, they've come so long. They've come here for the longest period of time, and I think they've learned to grow in harmony. Um, would it be interesting if they all got together and decided to have a family night, or a cryptid night, and they all banded together to do some mischief? I mean, not 100% on that, but it is an interesting thing because these are wooded creatures. They live in the woods. They've lived in the woods their whole life, and I personally do think that if they have been there and they can live in harmony for the longest period of time, I do believe that they do have an established factor in a trust, a respect for one another. But if there is an elder dogman and a Bigfoot that do not get along, then it's going to be a very scary scenario with those two on one. So it is at the moment. I would say that they're in good harmony, that they can live in harmony together. But I also don't want to go off and say that in a way that it would be 100%, because we still do not know a lot about them. So we're still trying to figure out the whole roundabout with them. So I wouldn't say they're living in harmony for now, though they have a mutual respect with one another.
I agree. I know that the land in Ohio, this is what I've been told, is that there's both dogmen and Sasquatch on it. And the dogmen live in certain parts, Sasquatch live in certain parts. They don't fight, but they don't intermingle either. And when you said to have a cryptid night of mischief, I just envisioned all these dogmen and Sasquatch sitting around a campfire playing Life and Monopoly and Yahtzee. I don't know why. When you said that, that just kind of popped into my head. And I was like, cryptid game night. That would be fun.
A scenario if it were to play out, it does. But, now that you got me thinking about that, I probably will definitely be something to envision. It'd be funny, too, if the human breaks it up and they all just go into, a psychotic mode.
Or then they're just like, come on over and sit with us. Have a seat.
You got a six-pack. He's got a six-pack, people. Let's get him going.
Popcorn. They brought the dip.
There you go.
It would be a lot of fun.
Trust me, I would pay to see it.
I would too. I'd be like, do you see that? Am I really seeing things? This is a big discussion on the Dogman pages. Many of us believe in no kill. And by that, you know what I mean, but to the viewers and the people that listen, what we mean by no kill is that you don't go out with your gun and hunt for them, and you would only kill them if necessary, if that was your only way out. What do you think about this?
I'll tell you one thing. I think people post about wanting to harm one. I literally say to them that I'll pay for your funeral expenses, but then I come back and say I'm not going to because you did something completely stupid. Because I feel that if this creature is not threatening you, I would not harm it. But if you have no choice and this creature is about to charge at you, I would definitely say something or do something to get it away from you. Now, there are methods to not necessarily tamper with these creatures with a weapon that could involve a gunshot or a knife. There are people who use air horns. There are people who will scream at them because of their sensitive ears, like a bear, and scare it away. But then there are people out there who will easily say, I want to hunt one to, just prove they exist. And I just think it's arrogant, if you ask me, about how people decide to do that type of stuff, because it is a very ballsy move to do if you want to go out and try to shoot one, because you could shoot one, but then there's another 7 coming right at you, and then of course that's you used all your ammunition on one. Try using it again on 7, and if you can make it in time, it's a very scary scenario. So I personally am a supporter of the no kill, but if my life was threatened, I would use pro kill, because I would be self-defense, of course. And that argument could easily be specified with the same thing with Sasquatch. And of course, if you are a big supporter of the wildlife, with poaching, with bears, and of course mountain lions, and even just in general with lions in Africa and whatnot.
I agree. And you said if they're going to charge you, a lot of times they do a bluff charge like a bear will. And I know we repeatedly tell people not to run. I don't know how many people I've told, but I know I've seen you tell people, if these things come at you, don't run, because they will give chase. And I've also heard that dog whistles work as well.
That's a very interesting thing too. When I first heard that, I was like, oh, so it's kind of tying into one of an ancestor of a dog, because if you could do a dog whistle and they'll actually respond to it, that's a scary thought, but also pretty cool. But I will say though, when it comes to when people run, I always say don't become the prey, just be you, but don't become prey. You run, you instantly become a deer to them. And it's instinct. And of course, if you do stare at one, don't show your an attitude of aggressiveness, because I think they can pick up on a signal like a dog can pick up on an individual, and they could tell that they could have some fun with somebody, but they can also not have fun with somebody. I know there are some reports of when going to the more Sasquatch type, they'll just look at you and just walk away and just carry on with their day. But you look at a canine variant, you're gonna either go for the adrenaline rush, or you're just gonna sit there and respect the ground but move back slowly. And it's a scary sight for anybody out there who experiences that type of phenomenon. But I always encourage people never to do the bad idea of running or going out to shoot one for fun, because it's going to bite you back in the ass big time.
I agree. There's a gentleman that's on one of the pages, and he is always talking about, I've got a new gun. I'm going to go out in the woods and look for this today. Who wants to go with me? He's always talking about what kind of gun he's got, what he's going to do with it. And I've just learned to ignore him. I'm like, I told him one day, I said, you're going to go out and get your ass killed. I said, you don't ever want to go hunt one of these things. I said,
oh yeah,
that's the dumbest shit I've heard. I mean, I'm brutally honest about it. The stories I've heard, the things I've personally experienced, I wouldn't pull a gun on those around me. But then again, I don't think they're really aggressive yet.
It's a scary thought. I'll be honest with you. I would not want to do something that's ridiculous. And for people who want to encourage that, because it's going to be basically another incident of the missing 411, or very, very sad closed casket funeral.
I agree. And if one of these things attacks you, I don't think there's really going to be anything left.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Let's look at the LBL case. I don't think there was a single ounce except for blood and guts.
I agree. If anybody ever asks about Dogman, I always tell them to research that case. And a lot of people haven't heard of it. But that's later on in one of those questions, the LBL. What made you decide to join NADP out of all the other groups, and join them and not another team that researches dogmen?
Well, it's interesting because there wasn't a lot of digging on Dogman for groups or research that of a worldwide support group for this. So I had sent Jody a message one day saying if you ever need a representative for the so-called state, that I'm 100% interested. And I asked him, and of course he threw me on because there wasn't a representative. So I just, that was basically how it started. And it's an interesting run, but with how things are lately, I just go with my gut. So, but yeah, that's basically how it started. I just messaged Jody and said, hey, you want me aboard? I'll definitely do it.
Yeah, I had met him in 2015, and that's at a conference. It was ShadowCon in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And I had never heard of Dogman before, or Dogman at the time. And I got to talk to him, and he told me what they were. And from then on, I communicated with him, and I ended up being the state representative for Indiana. And I talked to him and Dave Jones and Jay Lynch at least once a week. And if I find anything out, I'll message them and say, hey, did you hear about this? Did you hear about that? What do you think of this? They've got some really interesting things going on right now. And they had the 2 police officers who were out hunting in Louisiana that had sighted one. I think it was under 10 feet away from them. And the dogmen didn't see them. It was really odd because my friend that lives where Swamp People's filmed at, he lives on one of the bayous down there. Nuts. Morgan City, I think. around there, Patterson. And across the street from his house is just an empty field. And they don't have wolves in Louisiana, he said. And he had seen a wolf walking around, and it didn't hit him at first. And then he messaged me couple weeks after it happened and said, "Hey, it just hit me. I saw a wolf walking around and it went into the swamp." And he said it was absolutely huge. And this is the same guy that has seen a lougarou. And he's had all kinds of pictures of stuff. He was sitting out on his back porch with wife, and they started hearing all these crazy howls and screams and noises coming from the woods. It scared them so much they went inside, got their guns, locked the door, and stayed up the rest of the night.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's yep. That's definitely a scary situation. He saw a lougarou too, so that already seals the deal. I mean, God
Yeah,
bless for him.
He said that him and his cousin were out hunting, and it was following them. He said that was one of the scariest times he'd ever had. I'm going to have him on one day, if I can ever get him to come on when he has time.
Definitely.
And he's got all kinds of experiences with a little bit of everything, I think. Excuse me. Have you ever seen a UFO, black-eyed children, anything that's not a spirit or a cryptid?
No, never. And I mean, I'm going to say that with the ending of that one saying "yet," because if I ever do, it'll be because I know that's a good phenomenon, and I'm interested to see what's going to happen. I mean, I still have a lot of experience for me to learn and for me to live a lot of time in my life to explore. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely on my bucket list to see one of them one day.
You'll, like with anything else, you'll think to yourself, did I really see that? I've only seen one, so that I know of. I can't say that for sure. But we had discussed earlier that NADP has videos of dogmen sighting locations on their webpage, like Germantown, the LBL. I think they have the Beasterbury Road up there now, with eyewitness interviews and evidence, which is great information so the public is more aware of their existence and they can learn more about them, which I think is a great job that Jody and the guys did. Jody and Dave and all those guys that are in the main core group there that investigate together. And I personally have been invited over last fall when they had that one dogman sighting right outside Germantown. They told me about it on Wednesday, and it was a Thursday, and they asked me to come over Friday, and I couldn't do it. I didn't have a sitter, but I told them to let me know in advance, and I would love to go over and investigate with them. And I would like to go back over this summer and check out Germantown again as well. And I know Adam Davis has some crazy stories about there. And we were actually out there one night. But what do you think of someone doing a reality show about dogmen? Do you think it'd be a real story or faked evidence, or would it be similar to how they do the Bigfoot shows?
Well, I mean, my problem is with reality television is that it's really hypocritical to see people when they get paid big fat paychecks just to sit and act. You would think reality TV would be depictions of real life situations and, them figuring out the situations themselves without having to the smoke and mirrors. So I'm a buff on the thing with reality TV, but I would love. I mean, maybe not a reality show, but because I feel that there isn't enough. Well, there is enough, but I feel that I don't think I would feel producers and the network executive who would want the show pitched, or if the show was pitched to them, that they would make a mockery out of it. And we've seen this with Mountain Monsters a big time, I think, on some episodes. On top of that, when you look at shows like Josh Gates when he did Destination Truth, and when you had people do those type of shows, it was a very scary situation because you don't know what they're going to research or find. But I do think that if someone did execute a reality TV show for a dog man, that I would hope it's done right. I would hope that there is evidence. I would hope that people would not fabricate or make BS up to, emphasize on the evidence thing. But I would also like to see a TV series like similar to that of Stranger Things, but not necessarily with violence, um, done on cryptids. The whole anthology concept of cryptids around the world, people seeing them research wise. It might get boring to some real quick, but when you look at shows like the X Files, you can pull off 17 seasons or so and execute with great brilliance and still continue on. That's the same way I feel if someone were to do a reality TV show with Dogman, is that if it's done right, do it. If it'll work. But I feel that this is something that people would have to emphasize more on, that the producers or so wouldn't just BS just to get ratings and make a big deal out of it.
Hold on a second. Sorry, had a cough. I know that would be my fear, is that they would want to fake evidence. They would try to make more out of it than what's really there. We've discussed this when I've talked to my ghost hunting friends on the show. And like the ghost hunting shows are now going towards more demonic things, I've noticed, which brings in more ratings. So are you going to watch something that, yeah, I heard this say this, or are you going to tune into something straight out of a movie, like out of Annabelle, right, or out of the one, oh, I forgot it. The one where the kitchen slammed shut. They made Paranormal Activity. Would you rather watch someone doing a real ghost investigation or something that's going to scare the shit out of you? So that's my big fear if they would do a reality show. It would be fake, and it's just not right. I don't like when they fake the shows. And it's several things have been caught. So that's all I'll say about that.
Oh, yeah. And that's just my views on it, though. But reality TV, to me, it would have to be very, I would hope that it stays true to what people are wanting to research and learn about than make up a bunch of things just to get an episode.
I agree. Now, these are some fun questions because it's 10:44 our time. So we just got a few minutes left. I try to be in bed by 11 o'clock because I have to get up at 6. But do you have a favorite paranormal show that you like to watch?
When I was much younger, I really liked Ghost Hunters and Haunting and all them. So those were up there for me. The original Ghost Hunters for the first 6 seasons at least. And but for me, that's in the paranormal field wise. Cryptid wise, I always liked Unsolved Mysteries and Destination Truth. So yeah, those are basically my top 4.
I absolutely love Unsolved Mysteries, and that music just kind of creeps you out at the beginning, but you know what's coming up. One of the favorite shows.
I did a dare to play that theme song while walking through a park one day, and it was probably the most interesting experience for a young individual such as myself, and it was foggy, I must say, so it was interesting. So yeah, that theme song is probably it's one of the most terrifying tracks I've ever heard in my life.
So you're saying you scared the shit out of yourself that day?
I mean, I got $200 out of it, so I felt pretty proud of myself.
Okay, so it was well worth it.
Oh, yeah.
I would have done it too, no doubt. Will you be attending any para fairs or conferences this year?
There is this thing, Jody wants me to come and do this conference in Ohio, and, I have a lot of personal issues at the moment going on in my life with family, And I might have to just consider doing a virtual appearance rather than doing a physical appearance. But that doesn't stop me from doing conventions in the future. I would love to do a paranormal convention. I'd love to do a cryptid convention, and definitely meet people and listen to their stories and definitely talk about it. I love conventions in general. I mean, I visited Comic-Con multiple times and I just love it. So it's a good experience too. And you also get to hear interesting stories. So in the future, but as of right now, at the moment, no.
Yeah, they're always fun to go to. You get to meet different people. You get to hear their theories. What they've experienced is the most interesting thing to me.
Oh, yeah. And there's a lot of interesting stories people say. You never get tired of them, too.
I agree. Are you going to be going to any investigations, cryptid investigations, or any NADP investigations this year? As I mentioned, I was going to try to get with them and go back to Germantown this summer.
You know, I'm trying to figure out with the representatives around my area what we can do. I would love to definitely do a Dogman investigation with a lot of people. I'd love to do one with you, Jody, and whatnot. And it would be interesting. But at the moment, right now, no.
Fair enough. My last question for you is, how would someone contact you about an encounter that they would like to have investigated, since you are an investigator for the NADP? Because I know they contact us and we go out and talk to them, interview them, look at their evidence, what's going on around the house. We can set up cameras for them and such. How would they contact you?
Well, people can contact me at Kaz, K-A-Z, Nuke, N-U-K-E, FM at gmail.com. That's where they can reach me at. And, you know, people, of course, whomever they submit their cases to with me, you know, definitely be a good time. Very good time in that email. And I always recommend people in the emails to give, you know, their name, or if they don't want to give their name, you know, an alias and a description. And basically that's it. That's how I normally set up my, if you want to get in contact with me, Kaz, K-A-Z, Nuke, N-U-K-E, FM at gmail.com.
Fabulous. I think it's going to heat up a little bit as the weather gets warmer. And I think they'll start coming around a lot more. I'm just looking for ours to come back any day now. People probably think I'm crazy for talking about them like they're pets.
Trust
Maybe
me, not to say anything about it.
What? Maybe I'll put out missing posters for them. Would that be too much?
I think that would definitely get people going and be like, huh? That would be the first thing they'd say. Or WTF.
Yeah. I know the people that live right on the next street over, right in front of the cornfields and woods. Caden is friends with them, and he's asked if they've heard anything, and they've heard some weird noises coming from the woods. And the one kid, he no longer lives here. He refused to even step across the fence to retrieve a basketball.
Wow.
So I don't know what he's seen or heard, and it really makes me wonder. And the thing is, he wouldn't get in trouble for going there. His grandparents owned the property.
Wow. So, yeah, that's interesting. I mean, unfortunately, he's not there anymore. But I mean, that is something, especially if he had a signal from his brain say, "Do not go over that fence," because, and it's a scary thing. I mean, you know, even if he wasn't the best fence jumper, he would definitely have. There was something that was telling him, and it was serious. And I guess you could say that dog man now is in the possession of a ball.
Yeah, it's a brand new basketball too. And I know over the summer we had heard they tend to come around between 10:30 and midnight. And we had heard like I said, we live out in the middle of the country. And just across, it's really weird how her housing addition's set up. It's kind of like it's a circle. And then in the middle of this circle is like a little island with houses on it. So when I across the street on the outer edge of the circle, behind that is a farm, and there's a barn out there. And we heard howls and barks, and then we heard something banging on the metal barn. It was like late summer, early fall, and you could hear the cows moo, and they were just having fits. It was crazy. And Kane's like, "Do you hear that?" I'm like, "Do I hear what?" And I stepped outside the garage, and you could hear it. And it was just like bang, bang, bang on the side of the barn door or on the side of the barn. And then the cows would just continually moo, and you could tell they were fearful.
Yeah, that's truly a very terrifying scenario. I would be. It makes it sound like they probably found shelter in that farm, or they either sensed humans were near, or what, and they knew that it would be a little mysterious if they came out of the presence and they tried to attack one of the cows. But if the cows were acting up, then definitely there was something there that was looking for either food or was there for some mischief. Either or, it's a terrifying blend.
Yeah, and we've had cats come up missing too. I know there's coyotes around here, but we've had some cats come up missing too.
Cats, I know coyotes. It's funny because I know dogmen and coyotes. You would think they would tear each other apart, when really I've heard they've walked in packs too.
I've heard that as well.
Makes you wonder. They could find new friends.
They're kind of odd best friends, but hey. Well, thanks. Yeah. So do you have anything else you'd like to add, or any additional information for anyone?
For everybody listening in, and of course, as always, Jen, thank you very much for having me on the show. And for everyone out there who listens to the show, I hope the past 2 hours were as interesting as fun, and for 1,000 more shows. But thank you everybody for tuning in, and of course, as always, Jen, thank you for having me on. Definitely. And when I get myself functional and put together with my other show, definitely love to have you come on and talk about some paranormal.
I would love to do that. And thanks again for coming on. Really appreciate it. I've known you for a good year and a half now.
Absolutely. Yeah. A good year.
Yeah, it has been. And I actually really look forward to finally meeting in person and investigating together as well. I think it'd be a really good spot.
Yeah. Very interesting individual to be around. So definitely I'll mark it on my bucket list. You and Jody, from the NADP.
Jody and his axe handle he carries out in the woods. I asked him when we were in Germantown, I said, "Why do you have an axe handle?" He said, "So the dogman can play fetch."
Oh, yeah.
I was just like, really?
Adult baseball.
It was funny. He was just straight face, just said it, and I was like, really? It was funny.
It's a special adult version of carrying the stick.
Yeah. And I'll have to tell you about my experience over there sometime. I mentioned it on other shows, so we'll have to discuss that. Well, if you want to hang out a second, I'm going to go ahead and sign off for the night. And thank you for coming on again. Thank you, everyone, for listening. And have a safe night. And we will see you next Wednesday.
Good night.
Have a good night.